Good afternoon. We'll give everybody a couple minutes to join now that we're live. Um, Greg, give me a thumbs up in the chat when we've got quorum, and we'll go from there. But thanks for taking the time, everybody. Hey, Rakesh, how are you? Joshua, nice to see you. Yep, thanks, Greg. Good call. Yeah, job questions. I'll try to answer them kind of as they come in. If it's pertinent to the section of the conversation we're in, otherwise I might hold on to them until the end. Hey, Patrick. Absolutely. Thanks for coming. Okay, we are at one past. Yep, just what I was thinking, Greg. Okay, let's jump in. Let's talk about the ComEd EVSE Make Ready rebate. So the point of this is to more or less kind of demystify or just kind of cover the incentive program from a very kind of simplistic what's covered, what's not, how do you apply, anything you should be aware of from a pitfall perspective or trip hazard, that kind of thing. So we'll kind of run through the program overview. I will spend some time kind of talking about switch and tie it back to how what we do is relevant to the program and helps with qualification applications and things like that. But yeah, let's just jump right into it. Agenda wise, a quick intro. So I am Tom Kasper, Switch's Senior Business Development Manager for the Central Region. I am based here in Chicago. I've been a ComEd customer my whole life. I don't know if that's something to brag about, but I do live in Chicago in the ComEd territory. Prior to Switch and EV charging, I spent a lot of time on the commercial lighting and electrical side of things. So pretty familiar with ComEd's incentive programs from the lighting LED retrofit perspective as well. So I'm really excited about the ComEd program on the EV charging side of things. And let's kind of just jump right into the rebate program. So ComEd launched this at the auto show, the Chicago Auto Show this year. The main things to keep in mind here, just high level, is it does allow for up to 100% of the make-ready cost to be covered. A lot of programs will cap it at 60 or 80 or require like a special customer group to receive that 100%. ComEd goes 100% on the make-ready costs. But you see that second bullet there, the increased incentive for select customers. So they've essentially set two tiers, and we can kind of jump right into that now. Every ComEd customer on the commercial side is eligible for, at a minimum, $5,333 per port. And then the max incentive, or the second tier, is $8,000 for select customers. And we'll discuss that a little bit more later on. And that's on the level 2 charging side. DC fast charging side, similar concept, $667 per kilowatt or $1,000 per kilowatt, depending on which group you fall into. And again, either or will cover up to 100% of the make-ready installation cost. Meaning, if the installation on a level 2 charging project costs $4,600, they'll cover the full $4,600, not $5,333. They'll cover up to whatever it cost on the make-ready side. If it costs $5,334, they would cover all but $1 per port, if that makes sense. And then the deadline to apply is within 90 days of the project completion. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Again, 10 ports max, 2 ports minimum. eligible customers, and that's going to be for the second level of the incentive, live in or serve low income communities, environmental justice communities, restore, reinvest, and renew communities. Or if you can demonstrate that over 50% of the driving done by the vehicles are in low income communities or EIECs, that makes you eligible for $8,000 per level 2 charger. Everything outside of that falls into the $5,333 per level 2 charger. There is a map function on their website, actually. If you go through the ComEd website to look through the terms and conditions and apply, there is a map you can click on and type in the address of the property or of the project, and it will overlay a map and show whether or not you fall into the it's going to either be I forget if it's green or white. And I believe if you're in the green space, you qualify for the $8,000 incentive. The white space, the 5333. There are other special circumstances I talked about above, but at a high level, that's kind of the easiest way to determine which you're most likely going to qualify for. Again, the fine print. So that what makes this program a little bit different than some we've seen elsewhere. Eligible costs include permits, electrical panel upgrades, conduit, wiring, site work, trenching and repair, and then any protective equipment, associated labor. So if you look at this picture here, everything in green, from the utility transformer to the panel, and then eventually to the EV charger, is covered. What's not covered? The EV chargers themselves, the mounting equipment, pedestals, any striping or signage that you'd like to do to promote the EV chargers is not covered by the program. So this is truly a parts and labor materials make ready incentive. It tends to be something people get a little bit confused about. But I just kind of wanted to make that really clear. You are required to purchase and install a charger. You can't apply for the incentive without the serial numbers. You need a lot of information about each charger, but you need the specific serial numbers for all of the chargers installed to be able to proceed through the application process. So not only are they requiring it, but they're actually requiring you to call out specifically what chargers are going where, what their serial numbers are. So there's really no way to get around it without purchasing and installing chargers. And again, the payment limits, 10 port max, so $53,330 per site. If you were to do 10 ports, 2 ports on the low end minimum, so 10,666, and then 80,000 or 16,000 on the select customer incentive. Again, Greg, thank you for dropping that the link to the map in the chat. So if you go on that link, you can actually pull up different addresses and things if you're considering adding EV charging, which I'm hoping you are. Hopefully with us, but we can talk about that later. But that'll be a good place to start to figure out what you qualify for. And then same thing on the DC fast side of things, $667 per kilowatt, minimum of 50 kWs, or 1,000, same minimum of 50 kW unit. And you are required to do at least 2 ports, a max of 10. Point of clarification there, most DC fast chargers either come standard or have the option of being dual port. We'll get into the fine print a little bit more, but I wanted to cover, as it's top of mind, in that situation, if you were doing 1 unit with 2 ports, a CCS CHAdeMO combo where only one can be used at a time would not qualify. It would have to be dual CCS. There is language, I believe we cover it here. Just in case we don't, I'll mention it now again since it's on my mind. The program requires CCS. Oh, we do cover it later, actually. I'll just jump into it then. But point of clarification on DC fast, you can do a single dual port unit. It just needs to be able to do simultaneous charging. It can't be like a gas pump. You figure you can't use diesel unleaded mid-grade and premium all at the same time. You have to pick one. That's kind of how the CCS CHAdeMO units work. You would need a true it charges 2 cars at one time solution. Fine print. So requirements of the project, as I said before. EV chargers shall have CCS or J1772 plugs. CCS on the DC fast charging side, J1772 on the level 2 charging side of things. I assume eventually this program will change up its language to include the Tesla NACS J3400, the Tesla standard North American charging standard. As of right now, this is how it reads. There is some fine print in there that says CHAdeMO, which is kind of an older standard, would qualify if you can provide essentially a strong case for why. If all the cars that happen to park in this particular area of a project charge on CHAdeMO, which is pretty unlikely, you could make a case for it and get them to approve. But standard CCS or J1772. Equipment must maintain at least a minimum of a 97% uptime reliability standard, consistent with the NEVI standards and requirements. EV chargers must meet NEVI standards and requirements as far as including OCPP, ISO 15118. And right now, I believe it's Open Charge Point Protocol 1.6 will eventually become 2.0.1, which is the upcoming standard. And then lastly, eligible projects must include at least 2 ports per site, which we've already kind of covered. These check marks indicate whether or not Switch meets or exceeds the requirements. And yes, the last one is up to you. We can absolutely supply 2 ports per site. So I didn't put a check mark there. That seemed disingenuous, but CCS J1772, absolutely no problem. And that's the case for pretty much any EV. It's not specific to us. Pretty much every EV charging company is going to offer both. Equipment must maintain a minimum of a 97% uptime. Switch's advertised network reliability is north of 98%, so we're good to go there. And then as far as NEVI standards, ISO and OCPP, check. In fact, Switch is one of 4 companies that is OCPP certified in North America, not just compliant, but the next level of certification with OCPP. I think we are also the first North American company to receive OCPP 2.0.1 certification for the upcoming change. So I just wanted to demonstrate that we can absolutely help and meet with all of these requirements and kind of help in that process. Timeline requirements. So this is another area where the program is a little different than what we're used to seeing. There is no pre-qualification process as of right now for the ComEd program. They have mentioned that they're going to put out a pre-qualification process sometime late this year or early next year. That very well by that point might be part of a second round of funding or a second iteration of the program. As of right now, you have to complete the project and then go through the application process. I recently went through this with a client of ours here in the Chicago market. We completed a project in January, I think. The program was announced. I engaged with him, helped him through the process. He completed the application, got an email that should be about 4 to 6 weeks before they get back to him with confirmation. We're about 2 weeks or so into that process. So I don't assume there's going to be any issues. We met or exceeded all of the requirements. But the one tricky thing there to be aware of is complete the project, then you have 90 days from that point to apply. And then anybody who completed any level 2 or DC fast projects between June 1st of last year and February 15th of this year, which would have been probably the last business day before the program was announced, you do have until May 15th, so you have a little less than a month to apply the project for funding. I guess not in advance, the opposite of in advance, to go back and it's not post-mortem, but whatever that is, you have time. You have about a month to apply for anything that you would have done last year, as long as it was done June 1st or sooner. As far as other requirements, the construction must be completed before the rebate is paid. Construction completion is defined as EV chargers are installed, energized, networked. That's a key phrase there that we'll come back to. Open for safe use by the intended users. And the job site needs to be clear of barriers, materials, obstructions, um, anything you could think of. So essentially, you need to completely finish the project and have the chargers online, active, and up and running before they will pay off the incentive. You can start the application process once, in theory, once the chargers ship. If you're able to get the serial numbers and you have the installation proposal from the contractor, you can start the process of filling out the application a little sooner. You can't submit it or expect to have an answer or receive the incentive amount until once the project is completed and they have confirmation that the project is completed. A little bit more on the requirements for applying. The following documents are going to be what they require you to actually drop into the application portal. You need the invoice from the contractor. So like a detailed scope of work with costs and dollar amounts. And that's because they're making sure that everything that we talked about earlier that is covered by the project is the only thing being covered. They also want to see an invoice for the EV chargers, and they want to see that separated out from the cost of the project to make sure that they're not covering the cost of the charger, as that's not allowed by the program. A charger, a spec sheet for the EV charger or chargers rather, with receipts, site photos of the installed chargers, as well as serial numbers. As I mentioned before, there's actually a spot on the application where you have to put in information about each individual charger, including each individual charger serial number. If the project is for public chargers, not multifamily, even commercial workplace, depending on the parking area, might not qualify as public. Public would be the vast majority of usage is for wide open to the public, not kind of in a closed or specific parking area. They need an annual reliability report, and then they need something to attest to the fact that the customer performed public outreach in the development of the proposed project. So they also want to make sure that people are aware that the chargers are there. We help with that as well. You can do your own outreach, but we also help by publishing the chargers on our app. We publish the chargers on PlugShare as well, so the general public can have some help finding them. Beyond the ComEd incentive, it is stackable with the 30C tax credit, which allows for a 30% tax credit up to $100,000 for the cost of the project. And that actually would include the costs of the chargers themselves. SWTCH does help with both the filing and the financing for those, if you so choose or if you're interested. Essentially how that works is the incentive is worth up to 30%, up to $100,000. If you engage SWTCH and we essentially perform the filing, it essentially ends up being a 26% tax credit. Financing means we essentially give you the incentive on the front end, and then we go through the process of applying, and then the tax incentive, once it comes through, is due back to SWTCH. Very similar to like TurboTax's get your refund instantly concept. At that point, the incentive drops to about 22%. Happy to talk through that more in detail. It's not really part of the ComEd program, but something that we thought would be important to mention. So with that in mind, how can SWTCH help? In lots of ways. But again, our goal, the reason the company was started and kind of what we try to solve every day are the challenges in deploying EV charging infrastructure in multifamily and commercial buildings. We do a lot on the level 2 charging side of things. We do a decent amount of DC fast charging as well. But I think at our core, we want to solve the destination charging. If people have access to charging at home and at work, or ideally both or one or the other, it makes the move towards adopting an electric vehicle much easier to know that you're not going to constantly have to be seeking out publicly available DC fast chargers or publicly available level 2 chargers in an area that you're not spending multiple hours. So we find that if you give people the ability to charge overnight or throughout the workday, it aids in their comfort level with EV adoption. So that's kind of what we were born to solve in the first place. And this ComEd program is tailored towards a very similar goal. So like I mentioned before, we have 10,000 plus chargers that we've deployed across the US and Canada. Our network uptime, 99.7. I understated it earlier, so I apologize. You'll see there's some of our clients that we've worked with across both countries. Some relatively well-known names in the market with a lot of property and portfolios. And then not shown there are, some of the really small customers we work with. The project I mentioned before was a really cool opportunity. It's a building in Lakeview, multifamily property that was recently rehabbed. And we put 2 chargers in, and they have the ability with the Make Ready we did to add 8 more as time goes on. But at Switch, we take the destination charging for level 2 charging, multifamily, commercial, very seriously. And that's, whether you want to buy 1,000 chargers across both countries or you want to put 2 chargers in a multifamily building. We're happy to help either way. Quick note here. Let's see. How much of the program funds have been awarded? Does ComEd make that information available? Great question. I don't know that. They don't make it public to my knowledge. I haven't seen like a ticker or anything like that shows how much they've awarded. I would actually be shocked given the 4 to 6 week turnaround. I would imagine they're starting to probably turn around some of the notifications of awards about now, given that I doubt anyone applied like February 16th, the day after the program was announced, and that they are doing that 4 to 6 week response window. There's $20 million set aside, and you figure each site at a maximum is worth between $53,000 and $80,000 if you do the full 10 ports. So they did a pretty nice job of kind of capping the per site dollar value where it's still really reasonable, but it's also going to stretch the funding out a little bit longer. DCFC with NACS, that's a little bit of a gray area. It's not covered from anything I've seen in they specifically call out CCS and CHAdeMO, like we talked about. I would assume you could make the case for NACS as part of the application process, or there's actually a email address you can reach out to some ComEd reps. They're actually really responsive. I had a couple questions on the application I was helping with. They got back to me, I think, the next day after I reached out. And we went back and forth a couple times, and it was a pretty nice process. So something I would say ask them about, but my personal opinion, I think they'd kind of be missing out if they didn't allow you to go with NACS. So I would think they're good with that. Any state grants or other utility rebates available? Yes, actually. There is the Illinois EPA Climate and Equitable Jobs Act round 2 of funding. The round 1 was specific to DC fast charging along like highly traveled corridors. The second iteration, which I think the deadline is May 15th to apply for that, does include level 2 chargers as well. We don't have much in here to talk about that particular program, but I would push you to just Google up Illinois EPA CEJA2 EV charging incentives. Hey, Greg, thank you. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Okay, how else can we help? So at Switch, we pride ourselves on being capable of a full turnkey, meaning we'll help with the design, quote the project. We can bring in installers. We have a number of trusted installers in the Chicagoland market we work with. We're happy to engage them and have them come out and work hand in hand with us. We're also happy to work with an installer that you're comfortable with. If you have someone that does a lot of work in your particular building or knows the building very well, you have a good relationship with them, we're happy to work with that person as well. That's pretty much completely up to you. Once they're installed and online, we help you set your fees and your rates. And then we set about managing your chargers 24/7, 365. We have customer service folks, switch employees that are available 24/7, 365 days a year to answer questions from you or from drivers who are having issues with chargers. When they're not doing that, they're just monitoring the network and making sure that everything is staying online. That's what leads to our 99.7% uptime. The quote portion is interesting. So we also offer, beyond just outright purchase, we do offer charging as a service, which is a subscription model. So think CapEx versus OpEx. We do offer two different ways to get a project funded and installed. We can talk a little bit more about that one-on-one after this if you're interested. Just wanted to call that out. And again, we mentioned OCPP before, so I'll just kind of cover for anybody that's not familiar what that means. OCPP is Open Charge Point Protocol. What it means for us is that our network, our software, our management platform is compatible with a wide variety of charging hardware. The chargers behind me are made by a company called Zerova. We have a number of key hardware partnerships, LG, Lite-On, a host of people that historically electronics manufacturers who make EV chargers. To be commercially viable, we need them, they need us. That makes us inherently hardware agnostic, meaning we're compatible with a wide range. The hardware that we utilize is also software or network agnostic. So in the short term, we design around, aesthetically, from a capacity standpoint, from a brand preference standpoint, what works for you. And then the real key, I think, from a flexibility standpoint with OCPP, what they're striving for and what we kind of lead with as well is long term, you can pivot that hardware that you bought and installed and got an incentive for to a different software provider without having to rip the hardware out and start from scratch. The same way that I can take my cell phone from Verizon to AT&T or T-Mobile if I see fit, if it's going to make my bill lower, if it's going to make my coverage better. Obviously, we do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen. We keep our uptime high, our customer service on point. We keep our cost very competitive and our feature set as rich as it can be to make sure that we don't lose customers. And historically, our retention rate is crazy high. But you do have the option if you see fit. We are competitors in the marketplace that provide their own hardware that they manufacture and they lock it to only working with their software, which leaves it to be a stranded asset potentially down the road if it ends up not being a good fit. I mentioned some of these before, but Zerova, Lite-On, EV Box, they're actually a local company up in Libertyville, ABB and LG on the level 2 side, DC Fast, ABB, Tritium, and Zerova. Some really, really high quality partners for us. And you can see how having the option, whether we need a 32 or a 40 or a 48 amp, or you want a freestanding dual port or a tiny something that'll sit on the wall in a parking garage and not take up a bunch of space because you don't have a bunch of space to be taken up. We can work within whatever confines you have. And then just to briefly kind of touch on what our solution offers, the operating system, number one for most people is it is a point of sale revenue generation tool. So it allows you to install chargers and then charge people to, a rate, whether it's hourly or by kilowatt hour, to use the chargers to generate some income and eventually work towards, a return on investment, paying off what you spent to put them in. Beyond that, what makes us kind of unique or special, we allow for access control, which is essentially a way of saying, if it's a multifamily building, only residents of the building can use these chargers. So we can lock them down with either an access code or a list of known users. And anybody who's not either a known user or doesn't have that access code won't be able to engage with that charger and start a transaction or start a charging session. Customizable rate structures is very similar to access control, except instead of saying yes or no, you can or can't use them, it changes to, let's think of like a mixed use building, let's say, where residents of the building pay one rate and guests of the building, people who are there for the retail side of things, pay a higher rate. Same concept, either an access code or a known user situation. Everyone will default to the higher, level 1 price, unless you're a known user or you have the access code, at which point it'll drop you to the more amenity based rate, or the loyalty associated with the building rate, whatever you want to call it. Loitering enforcement is exactly what it sounds like. One issue people have with level 2 chargers is people plug in, especially in retail. They'll plug in because they're relatively close to the door, charge for 30 minutes because they just went from home to the mall and don't really need to charge for very long. But they want to shop for 5 hours and leave the car sitting there in that prime parking space. So loitering enforcement allows you a way to essentially incentivize people to move their car once it's done charging, or once you've reached essentially loitering is based on either a time frame that you can set at 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever the max time you want to set it to, or state of charge. So if somebody's battery tops off, they'll get a notification that they need to move the vehicle, or they're going to incur a fine of X per hour, X per minute, one flat fee. That's completely customizable to your standards, but it's a way to make sure that, one, you're getting that turn so that more people have access to and can use the chargers. And two, if you do end up in a situation where somebody doesn't move the vehicle, you're at least still generating income off of it, since you weren't able to serve a second or third driver. And then you do get real-time insights, comprehensive reporting. The dashboard's really neat. If you're interested, we can schedule time outside of this to run through kind of how the dashboard works, what it looks like. Got it. We can absolutely schedule that. Beyond that, how do people use our chargers? Typically through the app or through a card that we send out. Those are the two ways to access the chargers. The third, you can scan a QR code on the front of the charger and just check out as a guest. The nice thing from the owner perspective is if people do have the app or the charge card, you do get a little bit more information about who's using the charger. If you have users who are going to be kind of consistently using them, it's kind of smart to push them towards the app or the RFID cards. That makes their life a heck of a lot easier. Spend a little bit of time on load management. I don't want to go too far into this, but essentially one thing that we know we run into is a lack of available electrical capacity to install EV chargers. So we have a few different ways to kind of make that work and optimize what you have and get more chargers into the building. The simplest way to do it is local load management, which you can see a quick illustration of here. Those 4 chargers are all tied back to an EV charger specific panel. They're sharing a circuit essentially. They're all aware that they're networked together. If one car is charging, it'll get the full 7 kilowatts. If all 4 cars in that coupling are charging at the same time, it'll split it evenly across all 4 cars to 1.75 kilowatts. And that's the same. If there's 2 cars charging, it'll be 50-50 split. In the 4-car scenario there, as one car reaches full capacity, it'll give its capacity over to the other cars and go to a 33% across the board split. Occasionally, we don't have a clean, easy EV only panel. And installing as many EV chargers as you'd like to would actually exceed the total capacity of the panel, as you can see there in red on the diagram there. And there's a really cool illustration of that here, which we'll run through. So you've got your lighting and your HVAC, your residential loads, which all peak kind of at that sometime after work into the evening time hours. And you can see prior to that, you're not really consuming a ton of energy on the panels. You're nowhere near the total capacity of the panel. Now, when you add EV chargers, everybody comes home from work, that spikes pretty aggressively as everybody plugs their car in. And you can see that, you might be able to get 1 or 2 EV chargers in. That third and fourth are going to take you over. As the more you add, the higher over the capacity that you're going to end up. So what we can do is actually install a metering device on the panel that's going to keep track of the total capacity on the panel at any time, or the total usage on the panel at any time. And what it'll do is slow the chargers down during that peak capacity time and kind of smooth that curve out and shift the majority of charging to overnight by, say, limiting the charges to charging at 10 or 15% at that peak time, until as overnight, when the panel gets a lot quieter, lights go off, stoves and ranges go off, it'll start to speed the chargers up back to full capacity. So cars are charged by the time people need them again in the morning. and you're able to serve a lot more vehicles than you would have been if you had to limit yourself to the capacity of the panel. Application help. I mentioned it before, but we're absolutely happy to kind of help you walk through it. If we work on a project with you, we're happy to walk you through to completion on the application. We can talk more about that offline if you're interested. But I mentioned it before. I've gone through the application process a couple times now, um, and I'm happy to assist on every project we work on. Okay, last thing I have is that's my contact information. If you want to jot it down, take a screenshot, um, feel free to reach out. I'll also I'll send something out to everybody who came as well, so you have my contact information, a little thank you, and an opportunity to re-engage if you want to talk more specifically. But I do want to open it up to any additional questions. I think we answered everything that's come in so far. So if there's any additional questions, fire away, and I'm happy to uh, take a swing at them. Not everybody all at once. If not, that's cool too. Hopefully, I covered everything you were interested in learning about. And as I mentioned, if anything comes up down the road, feel free, reach out. I'll send a little follow up as well. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes in case anybody thinks of anything, but I'm starting to see some thanks come in. So, absolutely, thank you for coming. Appreciate your time and hope to connect with you soon. Okay, cool. I'm gonna guess there's no additional questions. So yeah, again, thanks everybody for coming. Thank you for your time. Um, we'll be in touch, and hopefully, if there's an opportunity to work together, I look forward to connecting and going from there.